Welcome back to our community. Susie Thomas visiting with Heather and Josh Scott. They are the launchers of a new YouTube channel called Memoirs World War II, Memoirs of World War II. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You are speaking with veterans from the Second World War. So far, who has really affected you?
Oh, my gosh. It's so hard to just to put that on one individual because you run into all different kinds of things. The combat veterans have the more glorious stories that people are initially attracted to. They were there in the action and everything like that. But there's just so many different perspectives and so many different emotional perspectives that have gone on there. There's a woman who she was a WAC, so she was in the Women's Army Corps.
Yes.
She got married right before she enlisted, and her husband was immediately sent to Italy to fight. And so they had less than 2 weeks together. They never went on a honeymoon or anything like that. So she signed up with the Army Corps after he went overseas, and just went about doing her thing. She got involved in the motor corps, and so she drove a Jeep, she could fix the Jeep and all this different stuff. She eventually got sent overseas, and as the war goes on, she finally gets a letter from her husband, and she found out he was stationed in Italy, and she was trying to get to him because she then found out that he was going to be sent, once the war in Europe had ended, he was going to be sent to fight against Japan. Wow. And she thought, man, I've got to at least get to him so I can just see him, before he gets sent over there, because she didn't know, was he going to make it back home? Right. And so she was able to, her commanding officers pulled some strings for her, and she went on this journey across Europe. And he didn't even know that she was coming. And she hitchhiked. She took. She found rides however she could in bomber planes. She rode in a bomber. She rode in the ball turret, which is, if you don't know, it's on the bottom of the plane, a glass ball that a guy sits in there and he can shoot at other planes. She rode in that as on part of her journey.
Okay, that's terrifying.
Yeah. She got rides from different people. Yeah, she hitchhiked, and she finally made it to Italy, where her husband was stationed, and they were able to spend 8 days together, and in the middle of the war. And not only that, but they got put up in what's called the Villa d'Este, I think is what it's called. At the time, it was used as like a army rest camp, and so
that was their honeymoon.
Yeah. They finally got together, and it had been 2 years since they got married that they finally got to see each other again. And so things like that where it's not always connected to combat, to battle. But there's always a story, and so there's
human interest story.
Yeah,
because we need to remember these weren't little army men that we play with.
Right.
These were human beings,
Absolutely.
People trying to live their lives.
Yeah.
This is a couple just starting out their life.
So when she left after their time together in Italy, when she left, he was, as far as she knew, going to be sent to fight against Japan. But when she made it home, she soon found out that he had made it home as well. And he actually never had to go to fight against Japan.
Oh,
she actually, when she came home on the train, I don't want to give it away, I guess.
That's okay.
But
it's okay.
When she came on the train, she got off the train, he was there, and she didn't know he was going to be there. So,
okay, that's a movie right there.
I know, it is a movie.
Any one of these, you've got a screenplay ready to go.
Yeah.
He comes home with the stories, and he'll show me the audio, and most of the time he's like, "You're going to cry," and I do. I'm like, I can't take this.
Oh, yes.
She's a good test for if the episode is working or not. I'll show her what we've got so far, and if she doesn't cry, then I know that I have to go back and
re-edit it.
Yeah, there's some work I still have to do.
That's the acid test for sure. Where do we find this YouTube channel?
Yeah, so we have a website, memoirsofworldwar2.com, and so it's MEMOIRS of WWII. It's always spelled out like Roman numerals. So, so that's our website, and you can link to the YouTube channel from there. But then if you go on YouTube, you should be able to just search Memoirs of World War II. and you should be able to find us there. But the website would be the good place to start, too, because you'll be able to see a few other things that we have going on as well.
All right, to be legal, you had to go through a lot of rigmarole. Heather, talk about the process of launching this.
Well, it was all new to us. It was just starting a business, basically. So a lot of research, getting our LLC and our EIN number and all those things, and opening up a bank account specific to this, and figuring out what we have to have the veterans sign to allow us to use their footage and their personality and everything, not only on social media as a picture, but audio and all these other things. So we've met with Josh's cousin, Chad Capper, who has a production company, and he's been amazing helping us through this journey and, building a business plan and everything.
Yeah.
So,
I never wanted to be a businessman, but in order to do this on a larger scale, we would need funding for it. And in order to do that, if your main export, if you will, is talking to individuals and getting their story, and there's going to be some kind of monetization off of that, you have to be able to have them sign a release form to say, like, I'm okay with you using this content. So as you know, if we want to be able to push it further and do more with it and get to as many veterans as we possibly can, there was different legalities that we had to go through. And like I said before, that's way out of my league, so I'm glad that I had her with me.
Well, it's a great partnership for sure.
Yeah.
Got to do a shout out for your cousin. My goodness. Owner, he did Stone Cat Productions,
Yes.
and folks who are not familiar with that, they would get calls from Los Angeles. Can you come out and shoot
Oh,
this?
absolutely, yeah.
And he said it's not as though Los Angeles is without their camera people. They do have people who know how to do that, but people preferred Chad and would fly him out there to do commercial productions and so forth.
Yeah.
And got to throw in an Amy Grant movie to boot.
Right.
Yes.
So very cool.
Yeah,
Had no
Sarah's
idea
choice.
you were related.
Yeah,
That's
he's
so
my
fun.
cousin. So the drive to put people in front of cameras and make them talk is in our blood,
It runs
I guess.
in the family.
Yeah.
It's in that DNA. Did you get to meet any who talked about any of the more famous skirmishes? I'm thinking certain battles. Who did you get to meet?
Oh, yeah. So actually for the series, I'm excited that the second episode, which should be airing at the beginning of June, is a Pearl Harbor survivor.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was
amazing
great.
story.
And actually, the way that I met him, I don't know if you've ever heard of Honor Flight.
I'm
Honor
not.
Flight is an organization that's all over. They have hubs all over the United States. What they do is they fly World War II veterans, Vietnam and Korean War veterans to Washington, D.C. for one day to just celebrate the veterans. And the whole thing is a big deal. People come out in hundreds to see these guys off when they fly out of the airport, and then welcome them home when they come back. Wow. And then when they're in D.C., they get to tour the city and see the memorials that were built for them. So anyway, I got hooked up with Honor Flight last year, and Milt was the veteran that I was responsible for this whole trip. And he was a Pearl Harbor survivor. So his episode will be airing at the beginning of June, and just his perspective on something like that is amazing.
What did he say? What was it like? I mean, suddenly you're there, and suddenly you're under attack. That had never happened before.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I don't want to give too much away.
Okay, right.
But he witnessed a plane coming right in towards the ship that he was on, and even watched it as it dropped a torpedo that was meant for their ship. And just to he, after the attack was finally over, he talks about how they tried to shoot back, but there was very little that they can do, especially on the battleships with their bigger guns. They couldn't even shoot the bigger guns because of how tightly packed all of the other United States Navy ships were. They could,
Right, it was a shipyard,
Yeah,
right? They're all
yeah.
parked.
Yeah, so there was very little that they could do to fight back. And once it was over, their ship was one of the first ones that got ready and got underway to try to go track down the Japanese Navy, but to no avail. They couldn't catch up with them. And then from there, Milt's story continues as the United States finally gets involved in the war. He goes into the South Pacific to once again fight against the Japanese, and he sees some pretty crazy stuff while he's out there.
Wow. And you got to talk to him. How different is that than reading about this in a textbook?
Oh, it's night and day. It's night and day. You can. It's great to have the textbooks and
Yes.
and the documentaries and things like that, and the truthful, more accurate movies to use as reference. But when you're talking to someone that was there, it just puts a completely different perspective on it. You know, someone else could tell you how my birthday party was, and you can get a sense of it. But if I told you how it went, it would be a completely different story, and you would almost feel like you were there. Same thing. It's just to talk to someone who was at the event and just see like a real world perspective of it. It's just great.
And even he's interviewed, veterans that have experienced the same battle, but
Yes.
one was on the water and one was on land, and you get this whole different perspective. It's just amazing how the stories come.
Which is great, because one of the things that we thought about early on is, okay, how can we sustain a series of, we want to put out hundreds of
Yes.
episodes. How can we sustain this series when so many of them are going to talk about the Battle of the Bulge, and so many of them are going to talk about D-Day, and so many are going to talk about Pearl Harbor? How do you retell that? As we got into it, it became very clear that every story is different.
It is,
Yes,
yeah.
through a
Because
different set of eyes.
Yeah, so every episode is based off of an individual, not an event. So that we don't have an episode that's about Pearl Harbor. We have an episode about a guy who was there,
Yeah.
and this is his story. So every time someone else tells it, it's a completely different perspective.
Kind of why we have 4 gospels, It's
Exactly.
4
Yeah.
different people that were all at the same thing, but
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
points of view in different ways. Do you connect it all with the Maps Museum? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we've been there many times, and a couple
Many
of
of their volunteers, I was
Yep.
thinking, would fall into your category.
Yeah, actually, Bob Withy, he was in the Air Corps during World War II, and his plane, a replica of his P-51, if you go to the Maps Museum, is immediately at the entrance of the Maps Museum. They have a replica of it there that you see right away, and he's one of the veterans that I've gotten to interview.
One
Very,
of the first,
very cool.
Yeah.
It's Memoirs of World War II. Go to memoirsofww2.com and click on their YouTube channel. You can do it right now. Josh and Heather Scott, thank you for bringing this to our community.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.